postpartum healing, the postpartum rites of passage, what that means, and why we should all be invested in it. And then class number 2, we talked about making food in the everyday kitchen and hopefully demystifying some of the ways that we can use what we have and not feel intimidated about getting into the kitchen and creating traditional meals with cultural ingredients. And then in class number 3, we're going to spend the day in the kitchen and hopefully everyone was able to get the ingredients ahead of time. And really, hopefully, you got the hint that we're going to work with whatever you have at home. So I'm going to show you 2 different versions of a grain bowl, and I have to give complete credit to a friend of mine who is she's a really talented chef. Really, she's an actually classically trained and educated chef. But she is a stay-at-home mom now, and she does a lot of community cooking demonstrations from her Indigenous cultural perspective. And I've gotten to learn a lot from her over the past 5 years. And I was asking her if she had any thoughts about simplifying meal planning for weekday dinners, which is something that in my household we've always struggled with because I always go big or go home. And I'm like, besides making like huge, traditional feasts, I don't really know what to cook other than like doing these super complex, huge meals that take all day, which I love to do. But I also work more than a full-time job. I homeschool my kids and we're really active outside in our community. So I just can't possibly be doing these huge, huge meals every single night or even every single week or weekend. So she and I strategized about making a different kind of meal plan that's still structured around our traditional foods. And she taught me about grain bowls. And she gave me the idea that you pick a different grain and every couple days you will switch out the grain. But once a week at the start of the week or over the weekend or whatever your day off that you have is, you will prep the protein and then the toppings that you're going to have on that. And it's extremely customizable. So you use the grains that your family really like. You use ones that you want to try and experiment with. You use ones that are accessible and affordable, including things that you may have stocked up in your pantry, which we did talk about stocking up a cultural pantry in class number 2. So I'm going to show you from start to finish 2 versions of this using 2 different grains. One is going to be a basmati rice, one is going to be a wild rice, and I'm going to show you how to cook both of those. And then I'm going to do 2 different toppings for the bowls. The basmati rice, we're going to do beans and rice, and I'm going to show you how to amplify the canned beans if you didn't have the time or knowledge or capacity to soak beans overnight and cook them from scratch, which I do love to do, and I highly recommend learning as a skill. But we don't always have the foresight to think, oh, tomorrow we're going to have beans. This is why it's good to get in the habit of doing it once a week. But let's say we have canned beans and there's nothing wrong with them. We're going to cook them up so they taste really nice. And we'll do a beans and rice dish for one. And then the second one, we're going to do a wild rice with a fruit compote. And I'm going to show you how to make that with some fresh berries. And then we're going to top both of them with a cashew or hazelnut crema. And I'm going to show you how to make the crema from scratch. It's amazing. And once you taste it, you'll never want to buy salad dressing at the store again. It's so easy and extremely nutrient dense. And hopefully, some of you can follow along. If anyone here is following along in the actual kitchen or you have some of these things at home, will you please let me know? Either come on mute or just let me know in the chat. I can see the chat right now. And tell me what you have, what you brought with you, and any questions that you might have along the way. But if we could start off by just anyone who's actually at home cooking in the kitchen, please do feel free to come on mute, come on camera even, while we go through the demonstration so I can see everybody and kind of make it customizable to what you're doing. So I'm going to show you a lot of different skills today. The thing is, we aren't going to be doing any chopping. So this is going to be everything here is knife free. simply because I didn't have, like, this is what we're doing. I looked around my kitchen and I went, okay, I have these things. I have canned beans. I'm going to just focus on these things for now. I'm going to do some simple cutting of the fruit to prepare the compote, but that is mainly just to get the stems off of the strawberries. And we're going to use the same crema for topping both of the dishes. So I'll show you how you can use it for something that's a little more sweet in nature, and then something that's a little more savory or even a little bit spicy. So as we get going, I'll be kind of moving around in the kitchen a little bit, but I'll try to remember to always orient back to the camera where I have it stationed so you can see and follow along. So, first step, of course, is for all of us to just go and wash our hands if we haven't already, and grab your apron and grab your grain that you're going to be using for the base of your grain bowl, and then any protein or toppings that you're going to put on it. I'm going to grab something. I will literally be right back in just 2. Okay, I'm here. And I wanted to show you all a couple different skills since we're here together. I wanted to make the most of our time. I'm going to show you, if you haven't learned from me yet or another source, how to make loose leaf tea, because we did talk about some of our traditional foods and we do emphasize soft, warm, mushy, very simply flavored, very nutrient dense, very liquidy, and served warm or hot foods for the postpartum healing period. And one of those traditional foods that we emphasize for postpartum is tea, making tea with different kinds of things, including herbs and plant medicines that are traditional to our region where we live, and then ones that we borrow from other cultures around the world. And it can feel a little intimidating for some people when they just have these loose leaf teas and you're not quite sure what to do with it. It's not as efficient for me to prepare a loose leaf tea in one of those individual sized, what do you call them? You put the teas inside and then you close it and then you stick it in. I can't even remember what they're called. They're like little bowls that close and then you put them in so you can steep the tea, or individual tea bags. Because for me, when I'm cooking, I like to make the most of my time and maximize what I'm doing. If I'm going to take the time away from work and my kids and everything else I have to do to prepare food, which I'm happy to do and extremely privileged to do, I want to have a lot. I want enough to feed myself or my family and to provide to my client if that's who I'm cooking for. And I just think those little individual tea bags for me aren't really strong enough. I like a lot of like really deep, dark tea. And when I make a tea out of loose leaf, I like it to be pretty deep in color and flavor. So you can really get the maximum amount of nutrition and medicine out of those plants. Because, there's just so much that they have to offer and so many reasons why we call upon those certain medicines during postpartum. So one of them that I'm going to show you is flor de Jamaica, and some of you might know this as hibiscus. And it is it's just a red dried flower. And you're going to want to get used to checking the quality of things that you buy at the store if you're not growing these at home or getting them at the farmer's market. Flor de Jamaica, even though it's dried, it is a dried fruit. So it should feel kind of similar in texture to like a raisin, where it's not dry and crispy, but it does have a little bit of squishiness to it. And that's how you know it's still like the best quality. It has been picked and dried within the last year. And I'm going to show you the French press method because this allows you to make a much bigger serving and a lot stronger of a tea than like a little a little tea bag, which would only have just a couple of these, and it would produce a weaker tea. Now, if that's what you wanted, you could definitely go for that. If you wanted a lighter flavor, go for that. But I like a nice strong one, and I'm trying to maximize the benefits of working with this plant and all of the fantastic things. So I'm going to just add a nice big handful into my French press, and I've already heated up my water. I keep a electric kettle. It lives on my counter, especially when I'm doing a lot of teas for myself and my clients. I work with medicines in different ways too. I make teas for um, spraying on the body and then teas for drinking. So I'm putting a nice decent amount in there because this is a pretty strong medicine. It's very sour, and it'll turn a very, very dark red color. And I'm just going to start brewing this right in my French press. The benefit to using the French press, besides being able to make a lot more, is that straining it is extremely easy. You could do this in a pot of water on the stove, but that would take up one of your burners. And then you'd have to strain it out with a strainer, which to me is just too many steps when I have every burner going for this meal already. And so I'm just going to put this in, depress it down a little bit, let it steep, and then in a little bit, we'll give it a taste test. So I'm going to set this aside. And I'm going to start with the Manumin because it does take the longest to cook. And I have Manumin from the Red Lake Nation. I did have some like hand parched Manumin from last, August, so when we do our rice. But I've used it all and gave a lot of it away. So I'm going with the packaged stuff, which is just as good. I'm not picky about wild rice as long as it's actually wild rice from the Great Lakes region. And this is it's a natural product. So it sounds kind of weird, but it needs to be washed. So we're going to wash the rice, and I'm going to do a cup of it. I already got my cup here. Cup of the dried rice. And I was actually given this rice from the folks at Nadosepi Huron Band of the Potawatomi last year when we did a doula training. And I was talking to some people about some of the work I do here in the community, and they asked me if I wanted some rice. And I said yes, and I thought they were going to give me, like a bag of rice or something. They showed up the next day before I left back home with 18 pounds of wild rice from Red Lake Nation. So I was extremely grateful for that. That was just freaking amazing. And I've given so much away and I still have so much to use. So behind me, I'm going to show you the strainers that I use for my rice. Because it is a natural product, it comes into contact with bugs out there. As you know, for those who've gone ricing, it's dirt. And it gets cooked. People are walking on it with their moccasins and stuff. So this does need to be cleaned before we use it. We don't just pour it straight in. We're just going to rinse it in the sink a couple times. I'm going to use the sprayer just to spray it off with cold water. Just to rinse off any of the dirt and weird stuff that's on it. The thing about Manumin is that depending on where it comes from and when it was harvested, it's kind of like it has its own personality. So this rice is very, very deep in color. And I just know that it's going to take a little bit longer to cook. Some rice from different lakes behave a little differently, and there's just variation in size and color, just like all of us as people. So just know that sometimes prepackaged rice takes a little bit longer to cook than the hand parched varieties. But for me personally, and for postpartum reasons, I like to cook mine until it is bloomed. And now I know this is like pasta and everyone has their own preference. And I'm definitely not here to judge or tell you how you should have yours. If you like yours a little more al dente, go for it. But for postpartum, we like everything as well cooked as possible. So rice does take a lot of water. Menumen takes more water than your basmati rice or like your Mexican white rice. Those we're going to put in the pan and we're going to fill up just to one knuckle. That's the trick that I learned from an Egyptian man that I was friends with in college. And he taught me about cooking rice long, long ago. And he said, when you're putting the white rice in, then you fill it up just to one finger. Menumen takes a lot more water than that. And it's not really as necessary to be so precise with how much water we're putting in for the menumen because we want it really, fluffy. We want it like it's okay for postpartum if it's a little bit waterier. Is that a word? If it's a little more watery, that's okay. We could serve it like that, or we could just take, a cup and just kind of scoop away some of the excess water if we think there's too much at the end. But a lot of it, we could also take the lid off and it can evaporate away. So if you read Sean Sherman's cookbook, he actually saves the water that he cooks the menumen in and he uses it for stock for other things like veggie based soups and stuff. So there are a couple of different options for you in terms of how much water you're putting in. I start with cold, so I'm going to fill this up. And I'm going to put it going on high. Once it gets up to like a rolling boil, then I'm going to turn it back down and I'm going to cook it with the lid on so that that water stays in and the heat stays in to cook it more efficiently. All right. And then let me see, my lid's right over here. I I like to not have to stir my menumen. The only thing is that I do try to keep an eye on it so that it's not overcooking on the bottom. Just if you're gonna open the lid, steam is gonna come out. And a couple things could happen. One is that you could add a couple minutes to the cooking time every time you open the lid. So I try to only open it once if I have to. And you might appraise how much water is left in your menumen. Like I said, it's not extremely precise, and every community, the way they like the menumen that comes out of their community is a little unique. So it could be that I kind of have a feeling this wild rice is going to need a little bit more water because it is darker, it's a little bit harder, and it's going to take longer to cook. So the other reason I like to keep this living on my counter is because I will fill this back up. I will just heat it. Like I'm not going to turn it on to boil, but I'll turn it on, let it heat up for just a couple minutes, and I'll turn it off before it starts boiling. Because as I'm cooking rice, if I find that I need to add more water to it to stop it from burning on the bottom, or if a lot of my rice or if my water is cooked away really quickly, quicker than I expected, I can add hot water back to it. I wouldn't want to add cold if possible, because again, that will just add more cooking time. It's not an emergency and it wouldn't be wrong to do that, but using hot water is better if possible. So having it at my workstation is a lot quicker for me. All right, so our rice is going, and I'm going to do the fruit compote next to keep it in order. So the dish we're making is a wild rice grain bowl with a seasonal fruit compote that I'm going to add the cashew crema. And actually, I'm not using cashews, I'm using hazelnut. So I know I told everyone to grab cashews. If you brought cashews and hazelnuts for this purpose are very interchangeable. It just so happened that the one of my elders, she got her commode delivery and it had a bunch of hazelnuts in it. And she knows I do a lot of cooking for people, so she gifted me these, and I've been trying to use them up. Um, this is the fourth bag that she gave me. They just packed it in there with hazelnuts. So I'm like, what do normal people know how to do with hazelnuts? Probably not much, but there's a lot that I've learned about how to use them. And so I'm going to use them for the crema, but if you have cashews, go ahead and use the cashews. Try each one and kind of see which one you like a little more. But we're going to do it with the fruit compote. So a fruit compote is basically a very syrupy, thick, rich in color sauce, essentially, that is kind of like if you went to a restaurant and you got like a fancy French toast and then it came with this really deep, dark purple syrup on it. I'm going to leave the seeds and all of the chunks of fruit pretty large for the fruit compote. In some restaurants, they might strain everything out, but for me, it's not worth straining it out, and we don't have to do that for postpartum. So the only thing I'm going to do is I've already been soaking my fruit. I'm big on soaking the fruit as much as possible in water and then like a fruit and vegetable wash, just a little bit of that. Because when you take it out, you'll see all the dirt and disgusting things at the bottom, and you'll never want to eat fruit straight out of the bag again without washing it. So I'm definitely washing it. I'm going to strain it out of the water, and then I'm going to just add the big chunks of it with the stems removed into a good sturdy stock pot because we're going to start cooking this on low medium, and I'm going to show you what the ingredients are for that compote. It's extremely simple and very straightforward, and you're going to use whatever fruit you have. I'm just dumping mine out right now. I'm using strawberries and raspberries because that's what I have access to right now. And you need a lemon. And I'm going to just take the tops off the strawberries. In our last class, I'm pretty sure I told you that you'll want to, at some point, level up your kitchen game and get yourself different cutting boards. Three at some point. One is going to just be for fruit. The reason is because if you're cutting meat on here, then you could be cross contaminating. I'd like to have one cutting board that's just for meat, and then one that's just for fruit. This is my fruit cutting board. And then one that's for vegetables because my vegetable one is getting the garlic and onion, and eventually your fruit will start smelling like garlic and onion. So to prevent that cross contaminating, I just have three different cutting boards. And I'm cutting these not super, super tiny. These strawberries are kind of big. So I did cut them into fourths, and then I'm going to cut them in half. And I'm going to do 2 cups of fruit. So if you're following along, go ahead and wash your fruit and then cut it to whatever size you want. The thing that I love about our ancestors, and I learned this super cool fact, is that they did build ice lodges in birch bark wigwams, very similar to our historical housing, our historical dwelling made out of birch bark. And they could pack it in there so precisely that they could keep ice all year round. So I think that's amazing. So I do think frozen foods do have a role in our culture. That is one of the traditional preservation methods. So go ahead and use frozen fruit for your compote if that's what you have available. Frozen fruit does work really great for a fruit sauce because it's going to release water while it cooks. And watery, soupy, liquidy things is what we're going for anyway. So it doesn't compromise your cooking. It is one of the best uses for frozen fruit, in my opinion. Frozen fruit can make things accessible year round for us, and frozen foods are traditional. So I'm just prepping strawberries. Raspberries, I'm not going to bother cutting. They're pretty small. I'm just going to toss those in. Another thing I like to add in depends on what I have. Sometimes I'll use blueberries. Sometimes I'll use cranberries. Michigan high bush cranberries are so, so good. They're very different than the more bitter kind of cranberries that come from the East Coast, which I still do love and would use if that's what I had access to. But the Michigan ones are just so special. And I can smell my wild rice. I do think it is one of the best smells in the whole world. And okay, almost done with my fruit. And then I'm going to show you the easiest way to make this compote. I'm going to do a no sugar added compote. And of course, I'm going to compost these strawberry stems. I'm adding all my fruit into this really good quality stock pot. You want a nice quality one to make a compote in because you are going to be cooking it down for quite a while. And I'm going to add water to that, similar to how we cook the rice. And I'm going to juice one whole lemon and put the lemon juice in here as well. So I'm going to bring the camera down so you guys can see the the cheater easy way to juice a lemon. I do think that we are sold a lot of different products for juicing things. If you already have a strainer at home and two hands that you're able to use, it's very, very simple to do. So once you've washed your lemon, now here's the thing my mom taught me when I was growing up. Even stuff that you're going to peel, you want to wash first. Because whatever's on the outside of this, whether that's pesticides or people's, dirty fingers, every kid that at the store looked at this and touched it, their stuff is on there. So she taught me to wash everything, like even your lemons, even your onion, even your, potatoes, like anything that you're going to peel or anything you're going to be cutting through, even if you're not eating the skin directly, wash it anyway. So I just went ahead and washed this. And we're going to roll it on the counter and just put our weight into it because that's going to start kind of crushing up the fruit inside and make it really, really easy to juice. And then I'm cutting it in half. And I'm going to use my strainer to catch any of the seeds. The lemon seeds are very, very bitter. So it would be really unpleasant, especially in like such a, you know, vulnerable period of time, like when you're freshly postpartum, to bite into a very, very bitter lemon seed. It wouldn't be very pleasant. So we're going to catch the seeds out of here. And then all this is going to go straight out to my compost to feed the creatures and my soil. I'm done with this, so I'm just moving it to the other counter. And I'm going to add a little bit of water here. My manumin is also, I can hear that it's bubbling, which means it's time to turn it down to low, just above low, to keep the heat in and keep it cooking. All right, a little bit of water is going to go into here. I'm going to fill it about halfway. We don't need to cover the fruit in the water because, again, it's going to release its own water as it cooks. And we want to reduce it. That's what we're doing with it. So we're just going to pack this down in and I'm going to put it on medium to start. And at some point, I'm going to take a break to find my lid for it, but it's okay if you don't have a lid. And now you're going to want to stir because it is going to start to get really thick. That water is going to start cooking away. It's going to start reducing into a nice thick syrup. So you're going to want to stir that consistently while we're cooking it. And pick something that you can really kind of mash it with while you're stirring it, because that'll again just start to release that water and the juice in there, which we want. It's part of the magic of it. And we'll kind of break it down into more like bite-sized pieces as well while it's cooking. You could, if you wanted to get really, if you wanted to experiment with different kinds of flavor profiles with your fruit compote, like I said, you could use different fruit combinations. You could use all strawberries, you could use cranberries, blueberries, blackberries, thimbleberries. I know there are other kinds of berries as well. Service berries, I've never gotten to work with them, but they sound amazing and really special. So any kind of berries can go in there. You could also add in pears, um, our things that don't come from our culture but are definitely a part of our everyday diet. Plums that are seasonal, those would be fantastic. I think we have native variety of plums as well. So whatever you have, work with what you have. That's our compote. So that's going to be cooking, and it's going to be cooking alongside our wild rice. I'm going to start on to dish number two, which is going to use my white rice. For this variety, I'm using basmati. You could substitute in your Mexican long grain white rice. You could substitute jasmine rice. You could sub in um, the rice that you make risotto out of. I've been using that in the past year because I was given a huge bag of it, like 6 pound bag from my friend. Um, and I've really enjoyed working with that rice, but basmati rice cooks a lot quicker, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. Same thing with our manumin. It's a natural product. We do want to wash it. And the thing with most white rice varieties is that you want to rinse it until it rinses clear. That can kind of minimize some of the concerns around one, it's a product, like it came out of, the factory floor. So we just want to rinse it off. And you'll see that when you start cleaning it, when you start rinsing it, it's going to be like, going to look kind of milky in color. I'm doing a cup of it into my strainer, and then I'm just going to rinse it and rinse it. And it just takes a couple minutes to keep rinsing it till it turns from that milky color, the runoff, until it's clear. So go ahead and wash your rice. Till it starts rinsing clear, and then it goes into our pot. I'm doing a stovetop method. Certainly, if you had a rice cooker, you could use that. That would definitely be convenient if you cooked a lot of rice, and it would save you a burner on your stove. And like I mentioned, the trick for getting the perfect amount of water is to cover the rice completely and then go up to the depth of approximately your first knuckle. And this is going to cook a lot faster than the manumin. It cooks in about 20 to 25 minutes. So I want to put it on high to start. And then when I see that it's getting to a rolling boil, I'm going to turn it down to low with the lid on because we don't want the water to evaporate away and stop cooking. And that's another one where you do not want to lift the lid when you're cooking white rice. If you can, don't lift the lid. You won't get the magical fluffy rice at the end if you lift the lid off and let all the steam out. And isn't this bag the cutest thing? I'm obsessed with tiny stuff. So my husband always buys me these little rice bags. And if you wanted to add in like an extra layer of protein to your dish, vegetarian protein that's really nice to keep around, keep in stock in your pantry, is a red lentil. They're very cost effective and easy to access at most big box stores or your community grocery stores. I would actually do like half and half. I would add I would do it half rice and half lentils, or I would do 2 to 1, depending on, what I had. If I was trying to stretch the rice or I had like only a half a cup or whatever at the end of the bag and I didn't know what to do with it, then I would do half and half. If I had plentiful, then I would do 2 to 1. This will basically, like, once it cooks, it gets very soft, very mushy, and it kind of almost disappears into the rice. So it's one way that I can trick my kids into eating the lentils. They don't necessarily even see them in there. And it just adds that extra protein, a vegetarian protein. That in and of itself is a whole dish, just the lentils and the rice. I would add in turmeric, ginger, maybe a little like clove, a little cinnamon, turmeric, salt and pepper, and that alone would be a whole postpartum meal. And then maybe do some like toasted almonds on top, as a whole entire grain bowl in and of itself. So that's just another little variation that I wanted to show you. And just like our rice, you do want to wash your lentils before you cook them. But I'm not going to do that now because I want to move on to the last two parts of our meals here. I've got my fruit compote cooking. The water's evaporating really nicely off of that. I have my manumin cooking. That's still going to be, probably about 15 to 20 more minutes to cook that. And then my rice that I just got going, it shouldn't take super duper long. I'm going to show you how to prep the canned beans next. And beans are definitely a staple food for a lot of our cultural traditions. They tend to come with some stigma about them, and some questions about if they are appropriate for postpartum. My belief and what I've learned from a lot of different people is like, yes, they are definitely a part of our postpartum diet because they are a really good vegetarian protein option. They are really smoothing and soothing to the digestive system. They're easy for a lot of people to digest. What I've also learned is that there are some people who just naturally do not have the enzymes needed to efficiently digest beans or legumes, in which case I would go for lentils. Lentils is a much softer alternative if you were working with somebody who did not like beans. So I have 2 cans of pinto. Now, of course, if I was cooking these from scratch, pinto is one of the varieties that takes a little bit longer to cook. Black beans cook pretty quickly. Navy beans are kind of in the middle. And pintos take forever. So I like doing pintos from the can if I can. I am going to rinse off the water that they come in because I'm going to add my own liquid to these beans and I'm going to show you the seasoning that I use and the method for making them even more nutritious in a way that helps our bodies access the iron in the beans. And I'm convinced that rinsing this water off of here is going to make them taste better and make them not so gassy for people. So same with cooking the rice and the manumin. I am going to use the strainer. This thing gets used so much if you can't tell. And I'm going to dump my beans into here. And I'm just going to kind of shake them. I'm going to look and see if they look really syrupy and weird on in the strainer, then I will actually rinse them off with the water. If they look okay and it's really thin, then I'm not going to worry about it. But I won't know until I dump them out. Yeah, they're really goopy, so I'm going to go ahead and rinse them. And instead of a stock pot to cook my beans in, I'm getting a pan. This is just a small pan. And I'm going to go ahead and dump the beans right into the pan. And I'm going to show you what I add to these. Like I mentioned, we're going to boost up the accessibility of the iron absorption for these beans. One way to do that is to add tomato products. And I noticed that my compote's boiling pretty good. I'm going to stir it super quick. It's already starting to get a nice, very beautiful red color to it. So I'm super excited to try. If you wanted to be really bougie with it, you could add a little hint of maple syrup to it or stir in a little maple sugar. You could do that with your rice too. I did hear this elder from Bay Mills Indian communities say, I got to go and listen to this teaching about their traditional blueberry harvest. They're very famous for that in their community. And she said adding maple to things is because people like it really, really sweet nowadays. She said when she was growing up, they would never double up fruit and berries. So I thought that was interesting. She's like, people these days, they just like too much sugar. So I'm trying to do a no sugar added, but you could definitely add in maple sugar or maple syrup if you wanted. But for the beans, we're going to add tomato products to this um, because vitamin C is going to help the body better absorb iron. Our bodies actually best absorb iron from meat and animal products. So our traditional foods, our venison, our elk, our moose meat, our bison, and then our adopted foods like beef, even pork and chicken have iron in it. Turkey definitely high in iron. So our bodies are going to prefer those. It's easier for our bodies to absorb them, but it is also a little harder to digest. So I start adding in like those bigger types of meat proteins later in the postpartum. For the first few meals postpartum, I try to go vegetarian as much as possible, or I go with a lot of fish. Fish is one of our really traditional foods, and one of our teachings that I've grown up with and learned a lot about is fish being one of the first foods that's fed to you after you have a baby. And it's pretty much present in all of our ceremonies. So I'm just looking with my eyes and I've noticed that my compote is really close to boiling over. So I am just going to turn it down to low. That tells me that I have plenty of room for the water to evaporate off of this. I don't want to spill over onto the stove and make a big mess. So turn it on to low. And I'm going to just let that water come off of there a little bit. You could also take it off the heat if you found that it was boiling over quicker than you wanted it to. And you could actually turn it off and just let it cook in its own residual heat until we're done. But back to the beans, I'm going to show you some of the tomato products that you could use. Because again, this is all about just going with what you have and what works for you and using what's around without feeling like you need to spend $1 million setting up a postpartum kitchen. You don't need to do that. So, tomato paste, it's a very thick and very, very concentrated tomato product. This is store-bought. You can make it. It would take a ton of tomatoes to make tomato paste, but you could absolutely do it. It's definitely like an old, granny skill to learn that. Um, this is super duper concentrated and it also has iron in it. So just combining this with things is a really good way to add extra nutrients to your food. I'll put a little spoon of this in almost every soup that I make. I'll put it into beans if I'm cooking them from scratch. And then if I'm like, modifying a can beans, and I'll add a little bit of this if I have it. Once you take your spoon out to put it into your dish, you're going to notice, okay, there's still 95% of the product left in the can. You're going to take it out of the can and you're going to put it into a glass container or a BPA-free plastic. and refrigerate it. It'll stay the rest of its life in the refrigerator once it's open. Putting it in the can, you'll get that oxygenation of the metal as soon as you open it, and then it'll just make it taste like metal. Tomato sauce works. Good old-fashioned tomato sauce, no salt, nothing added, no seasonings, just plain tomato. And then diced tomatoes, I go with the fire roasted. If somebody had a really sensitive tummy, then I would not do the fire roasted. I would just do plain. But for today, I have some, and this is just me. I get really nerdy about tomatoes. I'm probably not the only one. But I have these canned San Marzano tomatoes, and I got a huge can of them. And I've been using like every dish, I've been using these San Marzano tomatoes. So I have these, I kept the leftovers in the fridge. I'm going to take out two of these tomatoes and put them in the beans, and I'm going to take out some of the liquid with it as well. And these aren't seasoned yet in any way. They're just plain. Um, but you can can whole tomatoes. So if you're someone who gardens a lot and you get to the end of the year and you've got like 1,000 tomatoes and you're just trying to give them to people, why not can them? Because you're going to start adding them to things that you cook throughout the year. And I don't mind biting into a nice chunk of tomato. I know everyone's a little different with their opinions about tomatoes. Certainly, I have two kids that won't eat them like that. And I have one kid who just eats tomatoes like straight up, soon as it's been washed. So I'm just, eyeballing it. It's not rocket science. We're gonna just put what we have in there. If you were using canned, I would literally dump this whole can in. If I was using the sauce, I'd probably do maybe a quarter cup or a half a cup. I would kind of eyeball it and see. Because the tomato paste is so concentrated, there's almost no water in it. It's just like a super duper thick paste. I would add a spoon of it in there, and then I would just add a little bit of water to lighten it up. If you wanted to add even extra nutrients to it, you could use stock instead of water, veggie stock or a bone broth, whatever you had around. Or if you needed to keep it vegan, go ahead and keep it vegan. And I'm going to add my seasoning to this to make it extra special and amazing. I'll show you the blend that I'm using to make my beans taste homemade. Smoked paprika, and I do use these for postpartum. Most people don't have any kind of sensitivities to these, as we're just, using a little bit amount. The way my mom taught me is I just use my hand for everything. My palm is approximately a teaspoon. But if you're someone who values precision and predictability, you're going to start with a half a teaspoon and go from there. And then this chili powder blend that I has cumin, garlic, and oregano, and then the ancho ground chili. And I'm going to do like a little bit less of that because it is a stronger flavor. And I'm just trying to use it up. The thing is, all chili powder is not the same. So I know that a lot of us grew up using chili powder, and we might not have ever like learned what kind of chilies were actually in the chili powder. So do get used to when you get a new chili powder, if it's not labeled, open it up and smell it. Like look at the color, see like what the characteristics of it are, because chili powders are all different and they all have their own little personality. And I'm just gonna start heating this through. Um, Salt. When I'm cooking beans, because they are so absorbent and they're gonna take on the flavor of whatever you put in it, I would salt it at the very end to taste. I would cook them first, and of course, we're not cooking them, we're just heating them through. They're already cooked when they come in the can. Same with when I'm cooking them from scratch. Like if I'm actually cooking from a dried bean, I'm not going to add salt to the water when I'm cooking them because salt will break them down and it will make them split. And then when you present the beans, you won't have like a nice whole bean. It'll get kind of too mushy. And you don't want to oversalt them, and you can't take salt out once you've already added it. So I would wait till the very end to add salt, and I would just add a little bit to taste. The thing is with salt, it is just like all of our other spices. It's not all the same. So you do need to get the habit of you learn the salt that you're using, and the salt that's in your home. If you switch to a different brand, taste it. If you're using a pink versus a white, taste them both because they're not always interchangeable. It could be that there's a brand of salt that is literally saltier and tastes different, stronger or less strong than other types. So get into the habit of tasting your salt before you use it. And I'm just heating those through. I don't need to cook them. They're already cooked. So I'm just going to put that on low. And if you guys could smell this kitchen right now, because all I can smell is the fruit compote and then the wild rice, which is freaking amazeballs. So I am going to turn this way so you can see. I am going to lift the lid slightly to check on my manoomin. There's still plenty of water in there, so I'm going to shut it real quick. The white rice I'm not going to touch. You'll know when it's ready because it'll puff up and then most of the water will be evaporated off of it. And then you can fluff it up with a spoon. My compote's almost ready. And it smells and looks amazing. All right, so everything's where I want it to be. And the last thing I'm going to show you before we plate and answer any questions is how to make the cashew or hazelnut crema. Now, the method that I'm going to do, I am going to use a chipotle and adobo. And so I'm going to make a chipotle and lemon crema. We're going to do the same method as before, where we've already washed the lemon. We're going to roll it on the counter to start pressing the juice inside and then squeeze it with our strainer. This is one that requires a blender. So I'll show you how to do it and then I'll mute it while I'm blending so it's not just, killing your guys' ears and enjoyment. Whatever blender or food processor you have is fine. But I'm going to tell you some things about safety because I have two little kids and one big kid. And I want to make sure that my kitchen is as safe as possible. So when I'm cooking with the blender, just to ensure that there's no way anyone could possibly get hurt by the blender or, hot stuff go flying out and burn anyone, and that we don't break the mechanisms of the blender. I've taught my kids blender safety. And one of the things that I do is I always start with it not plugged in. I would never have my blender out on the kitchen already plugged in because boom, you got a power source. The kid could come up and push the button, and now we've got blades. And I always keep my blender separate from its base until I'm literally ready to start blending, just so that it minimizes the ability for anyone to come up and accidentally push it or do it because they're not listening, because that's what kids do. And it's not their fault. We have to create this safety for them. So just some things on the blender. I keep it unplugged until I'm ready to use it. So this one, you're going to go with how liquidy you want it or how thick you want it. If you wanted to make a cashew crema that was very similar in texture to hummus that you could dip things in, that's the way my kids like it, you're going to use less water. If you wanted it to be more runny so that you can drizzle it onto your wild rice bowl, then you're going to add more water. So we're going to blend this in batches. We're going to start with less water. We're going to add more as needed. Nuts should be kept in the freezer or the fridge in order to maintain their life and the tastiness of them because they do contain natural oils. The oils can spoil or go rancid over time. A lot of us are used to eating spoiled nuts because we just haven't grown up with using fresh ones. And I feel like harvesting them is still something that's coming back to a lot of our communities. But hazelnuts, there are native varieties to Turtle Island. So I feel really good about reconnecting to hazelnuts, and they just taste amazing. The one I'm going to do is add in about half of the bag. Again, it's not super precise because you're just going to go with the ratios that you want depending on how thick you want it. The only thing is that you're going to want them to be thawed. If you had just pulled them out of the freezer, you could soak them in water or you could just let them thaw in the fridge overnight. I'm going to put half of them in here. You will also need olive oil and then the juice of your lemon. And I'm going to add, this is optional, but it is one of my favorite dressings. I'm going to add one chipotle in adobo. This is just like the tomato paste. It's really concentrated and it's a pretty hot chile, but it's like that raisiny, smoky, fruity flavor. So it's not like, punch you in the face super duper hot, but it is a little spicy. So if you're new to them, start with a very small one or start with a half of a chile. If you're like a super old school, and you like the spicy, then you could even do two. But for postpartum, because we're going with gentler flavors, we don't want anything that's too upsetting. We're gonna do just one. And my kids will eat it this way. It's not too spicy for them. Or you could just do a little spoonful of the liquid off of the chipoles and adobo. And again, this is one of those skills. You could learn how to make these from scratch with your fire roasted jalapenos. And this is a nice, huge, chunky one. So I actually am going to cut it because I just know it'll be a little too spicy for my kids if I dump the whole one in there. I'm going to add my half of a chile. If you had a chili powder, you could definitely use that. But I like these because they're just nice and fruity, and I'm a chili lover all the way. And then your leftovers, same with the tomato paste, they're going to go into a different container in the fridge. And then we're going to add our olive oil. If you had another neutral cooking oil like avocado or even a little bit of coconut oil would be fine. But I wouldn't do like a butter or a ghee. That would change the flavor of it. And then our lemon. So same as before. Whoops, sorry about that. There's my blender with the nuts, the chipotle, and the olive oil already in it. We're gonna just roll our lemon. And we're right at 1 more minute. So this is perfect because we're gonna blend the crema. Same method as before with our little baby strainer. I'm gonna squeeze all that lemon juice in there. And then we're gonna add enough water to blend. Although there's oil in the nuts, it's not really enough. We do need to add a little water to it. And then we're gonna blend it, and that's the crema. And we're right at the end, so I just want to make sure anyone who needs to go at the hour can go. I'll stick around to plate it if anyone wants to stick around. If you need to get going, that's okay. So the way that we would plate it then is we're going to do our menumen. We're going to top that with our compa, and then we're going to add our crema on top. And then our basmati one, which I'm going to turn off because I'm sure it's done, is going to be the white rice with the beans on top and then the crema. And I did bring the containers that I use when I'm delivering to clients just to show you what they look like. They are a BPA-free plastic. I label them, the lids, with what I have cooked, the name of the dish, any special instructions or like allergy information, if it's vegan, vegetarian, whatever, and then the date that I made it. So we can use the first in, first out method that we talked about last time. And these are freezer safe, and it's just a little sturdier for me than using glass that can be temperature shocked and can be broken in very unpleasant things. All right. The way that I'm going to do that, I'm going to do it off camera because it doesn't matter. All we're going to do is put the lid on and we're going to blend it. I'm going to use the smoothie bowl setting because that makes sense for making a nice crema. And what you have here is a vegan crema that you can put on literally everything. I even put it on tamales, like when I do a sweet tamal, like a pumpkin one, because I just think that sweet and nutty flavor tastes so good. So there we go. That was two types of grain bowls. I know that we're right at the top of the hour, so I'll make space if anyone has any questions or anything that you want to share or clarify before we get going. And you can always email me or message me on Facebook after or text me if you have anything to share.
Rayan, this is Tania. I wanted to ask really quick, when you were talking about wild rice, I have no idea like where to start with that. Like even the farmers market, I haven't seen wild rice at our farmers market, so I was just wondering if there's a brand or something that like I could order locally to Grand Rapids, or if you knew of anything in Grand Rapids.
Yes, for sure. So this brand that I showed you, where did I end up putting it?
When I looked it up, it was like showing me eBay and it was like $50. And I was like, I don't know if that's
Yeah. Oh, definitely not. Oh, it's right here by my computer. So this is a good brand um, because it is a tribal nation that produces their wild rice. So it is a cultivated variety, but um, this is a good rice to start with if you're not familiar with it. Let me grab one more out of my closet because there is another type that is also a little bit more accessible. It is cultivated as well, and it's called Casey's Best. And it's a lot cheaper to order it that way. But when you order the one from Red Lake Nations, you're supporting the tribal community that produces the rice. The other thing is you just got to get to know people who harvest their own and hand parch it like traditionally over a fire. There's a lot of traditional methods to making it. So the thing is, it's so precious, and we only do it during one season of the year. Literally, it's like August is our time to do it. So we get what we get in August, and it has to last the whole year. But I'll send you some because I have so much. I have so much.
That'd be amazing. Or I can get some from you when I see you next week. Yeah, that's next
Yeah.
week.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Last couple questions before we go. The nuts to use for the crema, hazelnut or cashew. Either one, whatever one you have and whichever one you want to try. They're both interchangeable for this particular recipe. It's just that I said crema, and then when I went into my fridge, I had a huge bag of hazelnuts to use. Oh, and then Melissa and Sally will be sending out, if you haven't gotten yours already, everyone is getting a postpartum traditional food kitchen bundle with a bunch of amazing things, including a timer, a meat thermometer, oven mitts, a tortilla press, a tortilla warmer, and soup cubes so that you can start making dishes and freezing soup size portions for yourself and your family and for people in your community that you're feeding. So I'm so grateful. That's such an amazing little bundle. And then we'll have some recipes that we'll be sending out for you guys as well. So thank you all for being here and joining me for this series. I hope you got a lot out of it, and I really look forward to connecting with you all again very soon and wish you safe travels to and from your destination until we see each other again. So take care, everybody. And if you cook anything and take some pictures of it, message me so I can see them, okay? All right, Chimigwech, everybody. Bama P. I'll see you next time.
Miigwech, Fran.